Hello, we are sitting here today with JM Huxley, author of Milk and Honeyland, a story of grief, grace, and goats. Welcome, JM.
Hello, Faye. It's so nice to talk with you.
I'm glad to have you. So let me start off with some questions about you as a writer.
Sure.
Okay. Does writing energize you or exhaust you?
Oh, it absolutely energizes me. I think that probably most authors would say that. Um, I think there's just something very sacred about it. So, uh, my story is I have a background in journalism, and I was a reporter for about 14 years, and I have a degree in journalism, and yet I didn't know that I could write, and I didn't know that I wanted to write. And so I ended up on a farm, and my friends just urged me to please blog about it. I think they were tired of hearing all of my stories, which really were ridiculous for the most part. I mean, most of them were just laughable, and I had to laugh in spite of myself. But I was in the barn, mucking the barn one day, and I just clearly heard the Lord say, "You need to write a book." And I scoffed at the idea and sort of laughed and said, "Well, if I'm going to do that, because I'm having a hard time finding time to brush my teeth right now." Um, for real. I mean, it was pretty crazy. So, I just looked at it as an opportunity to spend time with him. And so because of that, it sort of became a very sacred experience. I mean, I felt like I was on holy ground when I was doing it, if that makes sense. I would pray going into it every time. And what that did is it changed the dynamics of the situation. And I've heard, I get writer's block or what have you. And I'm sure that'll come. But for me, that hasn't happened yet. I just felt like I had tapped into this holy experience with the Lord. And so I could really look forward to spending time with him. And then when we would write together, he would sometimes point out things that I had maybe neglected to think about. And then I'd write them down thinking, "Oh, I don't know how this matters." And then I would see that it did matter, and it was an intricate piece of a puzzle that needed to be connected. So, I mean, that's a very long answer for you, but I just totally energized. It was like coming out of a worship session, if that makes sense.
Wow.
For me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So tell me about an early experience where you understood that language has power.
Oh goodness. Well, uh, uh, it was. I guess it would have to have been the very first time I felt that God was reaching out to me. I met him in a craft store. I was in elementary school, very young, and back in the day, believe it or not, we could, as kids, join contests. There was a big raffle going on in Lee Ward's, which was an old craft store, and it was in San Diego. And my mom generally kept all four of her children pretty close, but this day she told my sister and we could fill out a slip with our name on it. And I was filling out a slip with my name on it, and I clearly heard the Lord say, you only have to fill out one slip if it's my will that you win. And then with that, he told me that I would win that day. And my sister was over there, just busily writing her name on as many slips as she could stuff into that box. And I remember thinking, I have heard the voice of God. I mean, I know I have. And I know that I'm going to win. Now, I'm not going to say anything because I'm not going to make her mad. But I really felt very confident. So I filled out my one slip, put it in the box, and I left. And I was very confident I was going to win. And so when my name was announced over the loudspeaker, it was no surprise. And so I think that was the first time that I began to understand that there was something outside of me that was bigger than me, and that there was a language between us. So I don't know that that really necessarily answers your question specifically, but I guess it was the first time I was mindful of such that existed not only here on this planet, but it transcended whatever appeared to be wholly earthly, if that makes sense. And then over time, you and I chatted earlier, an American and British lit teacher. So literature is, to me, divine. I feel like, we know that God spoke creation into existence, and what an honor to be a part of his creation and create through words.
Yes, I love that. Love that. Is there any particular author that you really admire?
I don't have a specific one that stands out in my mind. I think that I have been impressed with so very many authors. Actually, I'm reading a book right now by the name of our friend Lisa Ray Morris, and it's called Time Tree: The Emergence. And I would have to say, I have been captivated by the way that she writes. It's very relaxed, and it's humorous, it's jovial, and I feel immediately captured. And I say that Lisa Ray Morris is right now, in this moment, one that I would absolutely look to, but there's so many. See, and so that's my reticence is to name just one. I tend to really gravitate toward nonfiction and biographies because I think truth is stranger than fiction. I love fiction. But yeah, I would say that there are a number that I couldn't quite pin it down to just one.
Okay. I have that same problem. Very much so. If somebody asks, who's your favorite author, I'm like, well, let's see. There's Brock and Bodie Taney. There's Ted Decker. There's Frank Fritz. Oh, you asked for one. Sorry.
So many. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What about research? Do you do a lot of research before you write your book?
So in my case, I'm going to be doing a lot of research because my first book that came out was a memoir, and I've also written a children's book. So I haven't gotten to the fiction part yet, which I'm so excited to do, and I feel very challenged to do that. And so I absolutely will be doing a lot of research, and I suppose that'll bring out the old journalist in me. I did some. To be honest, with a memoir, you want to check your facts. You want to make sure that you remembered things correctly.
Right.
Was my story as I remembered it. But I really, really tried to keep it accurate. Relied on family when I, felt like maybe details were a little bit sketchy, but I felt pretty convicted there too. Yeah, research. I think your question is, do I enjoy research maybe as much as writing? I don't. I love the feeling of being uninhibited, going with it and writing, what comes to mind. But any good author will have done his or her research as well.
Right. Right. That's the journalist speaking, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And I think in our discussion earlier that you told me that you did, but let me ask, was there any part that you needed to edit out of Milk and Honeyland?
So here's the fun news. I was uninhibited that I ended up with way too much material. My Milk and Honeyland is not the world's smallest biography or autobiography memoir by any stretch of the imagination. I think it ended up at like 110, 115,000 words, which is very lengthy for a memoir. And if you can believe it, I started with 180. No one's ever asked me that, and I'm sort of embarrassed to admit it, but I didn't know going into this how much material I would need, and I wasn't really looking at word count. I was just writing.
Right.
And I had material, and I had that blog for a while, which I ended up taking down, and I think that was about 2011 or so, or 2013, when I stopped blogging the first time, because it was just becoming overwhelming, and there really wasn't the technical support that there is now, and I would have issues, and the copy was a mess, and the pictures, it was terrible. And I was spending way too much time on it. So I had a lot of stories in my mind. And I guess I started into it initially thinking it was going to be stories from the crazy stuff that a Southern California girl from San Diego experienced, having been relocated with a gaggle, 8 kids, to a farm in Kansas, and suffering all those things. I really felt like I was a pioneer on the frontier again, with every single obstacle and the learning curve being ridiculous. So there was a lot of suffering and a lot of struggle. So I had a ton of material. And I just thought initially, everybody said, well, you got to take your blog and make it into a book. And I thought, well, I'll do that. And then I working on it, and I just had way too much. So scaling back was hard. I think for my next one, I'm going to try very diligently to utilize something my professors in college always instructed me to use, and that was word economy, and to try to really just bring it in and not worry about getting in all of the information, but bring in those facts or those stories, anecdotes that are the most important, rather than having to feel like I need to share everything, right? So
Right.
I think she did a fine job helping me scale back. And she would say, yeah, I really think this is...
The library will be closing in 30 minutes.
The library will be closing in 30 minutes.
Please request the library.
So, yeah, I mean, she helped me.
You need to make copies or check out materials.
She helped me a great deal in terms of, scaling back on material. Some things I would have taken out. And she says, no, I think you need to keep them in. Or others I might have thought would have been more important. And she says, yeah. I really relied heavily upon her opinion.
That's great. It's good to have a good editor.
Yes, definitely.
All right. So thinking about all the things that other authors have called literary success, what do you define literary success for you to be?
So, we talked earlier, and I shared I had an instructor at Temple where I got my master's in journalism, who had received a Pulitzer in news writing. And I really just admired that. And I thought, wow, that's just the pinnacle of success, to have a Pulitzer, or to have a book with your own sticker affixed to the front that says, winner of such and such. And, I'm excited that my book will have its own little sticker affixed. And and that's just an immense honor through Author Academy for the best memoir of 2019. But I have to say my literary success doesn't look like most, perhaps. My goal in writing Milk and Honeyland was 100% about just showing everyone that cared to listen the reality of what I had experienced in Jesus Christ. And not that my story, not that I have all the answers, not that my story is the most important or anything, but I just think testimony is the most important thing that we can give one another, and encouragement. And I am never more encouraged than when I read other people's stories, because it really helps cement my understanding. And then, as doubt creeps along, and doubt is always there, right? There's that little voice saying, well, what if you misunderstood this, or what if you didn't hear it right, or what if there is no God, right? It's stories like we share with one another that help remind us that no, that there absolutely is. And look at all that he's done, because he can do so much. I mean, he can hit it out of the park for us. And the very next day, we're down in the dugout whining about how we never got a turn at bat. I just feel like the things that he did for me were so ridiculous and so outrageous and so full of love and so supernatural. How could I not share them? So I feel like literary success is that one person that picks it up here at the library, or, in their home, and who says, what, I really doubt it. No, I don't. And so, he doesn't need me to do those things. He needs a heart that's willing to do it. So I'm planting seeds, maybe. That's my hope. That would be literary success for me.
I hear you. All right, so let's turn the tide here and talk more about your book specifically. Share with me briefly the backstory behind Milk and Honeyland.
Okay. So, and it's funny, I told you earlier I don't have a book with me, but I do have a card. I took this actually at our book signing event, and it was just an afterthought snapshot. Okay, so the backstory is this. In 1978, I was in 8th grade, San Diego, when PSA Flight 182 crashed into the center of my hometown, San Diego, in North Park. It was just really a few miles from my home, and it really changed my perspective. I felt that, I was a kid, but I just felt it was a harbinger of things to come. Don't ask me why. I really did. And it would turn out that about 10 years later, a decade later, my dad also died in a commercial plane crash.
Oh.
And I ended up about a year later as a traffic reporter in Southern California, flying over San Diego's freeways. And I also had my own emergency. I was cleared for landing at Miramar, black smoke spewing out of the back of my plane. It was a pretty frightening experience. And in that experience, I felt a voice come to me and say, it's not your time. Of course, all of this is complicated by the fact that I have a 2-year-old son on the ground, and all of those thoughts go through your head as a mom, leaving him. Really, that hit home, especially with the loss of my dad. And I was, 24 when I lost my dad, so pretty young. And so there was that emergency landing, and we were fine. I mean, obviously I lived to tell about it. And all of the emergency crews were called out. And I remember turning to the pilot and looking him in the eye and saying, wow, he said something like, you were so calm. And I said, well, I just didn't think I needed to be terribly worried, right? Inside I'm shaking because you were so calm. And he looked at me and he gave me a look I'll never forget. He said, I was worried over. And 2 weeks later, he and a very dear coworker, friend of mine, were up. I was home. I was scheduled to fly that morning, and I'd taken the morning off and to be with my son. And their plane went down over I-5 in Solana Beach, and they were both killed. And there were some other incidences. My parents had an emergency landing. I didn't even share that in the book, or an emergency situation in one of the planes that they had been flying in, even prior to my dad's loss in a plane crash. So, I mean, there were things going on, and I lost some other people, and I just was I felt like very, very prophetic with the way I was feeling, and I didn't know how to sort through those feelings. So I went to all the wrong places. I mean, I got tarot cards, saw a medium, did all of those things because I really felt like there was this hole in my heart I needed to plug up. I felt like I had everything. I was pretty much on the trajectory that I wanted to go on. I had promised myself I was going to use my mouth, my voice for good. And yet I felt something that was nagging at my heart that said, there's got to be more to this. I mean, you've heard the voice, right? Both at the craft store when you were little and in the plane. And well, anyway, I knew that there was a lot going on and stuff I could feel, but I just didn't know how to sort it all out. So, the long and short of it is that it was quite a journey getting to a place where I really had to lose everything that kept me from truth. So I had to determine, did I want it, but I had to want it at all costs. So for me, in my mind, I felt like through a number of things that I experienced early on in my 20s, I really felt like I was losing everything. And it was those losses that propelled me forward and caused me, I finally was relocated to Kansas City. And that's when, as a single mom relocated in Kansas City, I started to ask questions that made more sense. And until finally one day I said, okay, if there is a God, if you exist, God, who are you? And I just wish that more people would ask that. Because I think that if you really want to know the answer to that question, the Bible says, if you seek me with all of your heart, I will be found by you. And I think that we can gloss over that or, okay, isn't that nice? But really, if we really if we do want to know the truth, it's going to be revealed to us. So one of my favorite authors, I'm thinking about one of them now, is Nabil Qureshi. He wrote Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. And I actually used his book in one of the worldviews classes I taught for high school last year. Love the man. He actually passed away. He came down with cancer. But he said something in his I think in his book or his Bible study, and he said, those who fail to seek the truth will be disappointed with the outcome of what they find.
Right.
And so I marinated on that a little while, but I would also say, and I think that's true, I would also say, though, that those who seek the truth will rarely be disappointed. So if you seek the truth at all costs, regardless of what that means for you, lifestyle changes, whatever, you're never going to be disappointed because Jesus loves you right where you are.
Right.
You are. And yeah, the rest is immaterial. Start with that. Ask him who he is. So that's when it occurred to me, okay, wow, you are Jesus, the Son of God. How about that? I was missing it.
Awesome. Okay, so what actually compelled you to write Milk and Honeyland?
Absolutely, God. Absolutely. I was in the barn one day and I was mucking stalls and he told me to do it. There was a backstory there too. So I was on Kansas City and I did traffic news and weather for a variety of stations in town, I think about a half a dozen. And I was on air that morning, the morning of, I think it was June 2000. And the story that morning was the Southern Baptist Convention's decision to exclude women from the pulpit. And okay, this was before I knew Jesus. And this is my excuse anyway. I was in my 20s and I was a hothead. And I said something like, well, what do you expect from a bunch of men who believe in a book thousands of years old? And we got one call of complaint. And I think about, I've thought about that so often. And I feel kind of choked up to say this, but I sometimes wonder if it wasn't that one person that called to complain that prayed for me, that I would know the truth. So about that time, weeks later, I think it was, I asked, okay, who are you? And I find myself in a Christian church, and then I have this epiphany that, people talk about, and it's like this for some and for others. But I thought, wow, I get it. Like, I just was convicted. Oh, wow, Jesus is the Son of God. Oh, right. That means the Bible's true, the book I've disparaged on public airwaves. So in many respects, Milk and Honeyland was an attempt to set the record straight. So I saw so much on the farm, so much that made sense to me, so much. And I remember being in a barn by myself, sweat beads pouring down the front of me. It's not a pleasant sight. If you've ever worked in a barn and you've mucked, it's so unpleasant, really. And I just remember leaning against the pitchfork and saying, okay, God, man, you want me to write a book? What? Because I said to him, wow, I see so much of the Bible and the truth of it now. I was telling the kids stories like, can you imagine taking your favorite goat out because you had sinned and having to sacrifice it? Are you kidding? So there were those kinds of things that just made so much sense. And I could see so much symbolism. So I heard the Lord say, okay, we'll write about it. And I thought, wow, I'm going to write about it. I don't know with what time, because I'm not getting anywhere on time. And it's really hard to find time to brush my teeth these days, but somehow you'll make that happen. So that was the catalyst for writing. It was his prodding. And I felt like he was telling me, I haven't to anyone. I felt like the whole time he was telling me, I'm going to honor you if you honor me. I'm going to honor you if you honor me. And so being in Columbus a couple of weeks ago for the Author Academy Awards and having that book chosen as the top memoir for 2019 is radical proof that you can hear the voice of God and respond to it, and he will then in turn respond to you. It's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so who was the person that you had in mind as you were writing Milk and Honeyland?
I think I was thinking about the younger me in my 20s and how obstinate I was, and how I felt like I wanted to do things my way, and positive thinking was going to allow me to conquer the world, and that dynamic purpose was all about doing all of these things in the world. At the time I was in broadcasting, and I had done some television work, and I guess I think being a parent is the same, had those same thoughts, but I think that that my younger self didn't understand that dynamic purpose is found in everyday acts. And I also didn't understand that using my voice for good meant using it for good. It certainly wasn't getting on the Kansas City airwaves and saying what I had to say. Um, and so I also felt like, there's so many people looking for that connection in all the wrong places like I was. And what I didn't understand at the time is that my aligning with all of the wrong kind of produced exponentially trouble in my life. And things weren't going as well as I had thought they would go.
Right.
Our trajectory was off track. And I came to realize that perhaps it was not a matter of positive thinking, but rather positive alignment. So I wrote the book for my younger self. I wrote the book for a secular audience, to be honest.
May I have your attention, please? The library will close in 15 minutes. Please.
I love being at the library. Isn't it fun?
It is. I love it.
My daughter's in swim team practice, and I'm not close to home, so that's why we're at the library tonight, and I love it.
Awesome. This is a way to make it happen.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so there are obviously other people who would benefit from it. You say primarily for a secular audience. Will a faith audience benefit from it as well?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I clarify and to strengthen those with faith, obviously. We need that because we have an enemy constantly telling us that we shouldn't be thinking what we're thinking, and you can't see it, it's not true. So yes, absolutely. I had a secular audience in mind, women, young women particularly, but then women my age too, in their 50s and beyond. And so what I have found is I'm amazed at seeing people who, that are young and old reading the book. So, and I guess I also had in mind, but men have read it too and have enjoyed it. So, that's God. That's just that, it's his story. So,
Right.
it's exciting.
Okay. So I think you've kind of covered this, but let's see if we can nail it down to a core thought. What is it? What is your hope that this book will achieve in the lives of your readers?
I hope that it will give them confidence to move forward into seeing their stories, such as I've related, the amazing ways in which God works. I hope it will encourage them to stay open. Because here's the thing, like gratitude, the more gratitude you show, the more blessings seem to open and pour down from heaven. I really believe the more you see what's going on in the world, the more you open yourself up to understanding and seeing things that aren't coincidence, that are absolute messages from God, then the more you're going to receive those. Then you can sort of expect a miracle every day. That's my mantra. Expect a miracle every day. I don't know that I want to necessarily say mantra, but that's my slogan, right? Expect a miracle every day. So I would hope that people would be encouraged to say, oh man, look at all those things that happened to her. Well, those are for you too. Those are for me too. I would hope that they would say, and they would be more open to seeing and being aware of, like the reviews. God just used rainbows in my life. My daughter was on a flight when she was 14 heading back to San Diego, and she was very, very upset. And I share this in Milk and Honeyland. I just began to pray, and I, of course, was a little worried. And there I am at the window watching her get ready to take off, and this rainbow, a full rainbow over her plane appeared and nowhere else. And there wasn't a cloud in the sky. There was no rain. It was the most unusual thing. And those around were just blown away. And I said, if I could be so bold, I think that rainbow's for me. Because I
enjoy it, but this one's for me.
Well, I mean, the fact that my dad was killed in a commercial plane crash, and I have this history of such, and she's worried, and all of a sudden a rainbow appears. Are you kidding me? And so what I found was that he continued to use rainbows as his assurance and promise. And a lot of times we look at the rainbows and we're like, oh, isn't that beautiful? The things that we see that are in nature that resonate within our hearts and cause us to sort of in awe at the beauty of it. I mean, those things, that doesn't happen by accident. God is trying to send a message. And so I was amazed at how often he sent those messages, and I shared some of that. And the fact that they're not coincidences is absolutely, I hope I made a pretty good case. arguing that there is no way that some of the things that have happened in my life have been coincidences.
Right. Right. Well, JM, I am so excited to see your passion and your story and your longing for others to know the Lord the way that you know him. And I especially appreciate your obedience to do what he told you to do in writing this book. And I am without a doubt certain that it will achieve those things in the lives of people. I think that those who don't know the Lord, who don't even want to know the Lord, will come to know him. And I can see young moms getting through this period of their lives and realizing that, wow, they really can do it, that they really do have somebody walking beside them all the time. And that women and men both, of any age, will come to understand that the Father really is there for them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I can see that happening. I thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks for having me on tonight. I so appreciate it, Faye.
Well, I'm excited, and I look forward to see the new things that you come up with.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. You have a good evening.
Thank you. You do the same.
Bye.